In this episode, I'm going to harvest some mint. I'm also going to show you some of the different pests I found in my garden this week and how I've dealt with those, including aphids and cabbage worms. And then I'm also going to thin out and separate and replant some of the bush beans and one of the tomato plants. You can see how well the mint is doing. It's really thick. Some of the leaves lower down are kind of starting to have some issues, and we've got little sprouts coming up. So I'm going to thin some of this out and put it in this big jar over here to make some mint sun tea. So to start, I'm just going to kind of go down here and count about three nodes. So node being where the stems are coming out here, 3 nodes up. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm just going to cut right above that. So I'm going to take everything just right above that spot. And I'm just going to continue doing that in a few other places here. Just going to cut that one closer to the base. Here is so big. So you can see I got rid of a lot of the overgrowth as well as the parts that were trying to jump out of the pot. And you can see down here where we've already got some new growth starting. So now the sun's going to be able to get to that new growth and it's just going to pop right back up. Then I'm going to take all this mint that I harvested today, and I'm going to just take the leaves from the stem and add it to my half-gallon mason jar here, and then I'll add some water to it and then just let it sit out in the sun for probably 24 hours to make some mint sun tea. So there's all the mint leaves that I've got in the jar. So then I'll just add water and set this out in the sun. And then I've got my mint tea brewing back there. I added a little bit of honey to the jar also. That's what's staying in the bottom. So I'll let you know how that goes too. Here's the finished product of the mint sun tea that I made. So after I let it sit out in the sun, I took a cheesecloth and put it over a clean mason jar and poured the contents of the other jar into this one so that I could strain out the leaves and debris and everything. So this is filtered tea, and then I just keep this in the fridge. A couple things I'm going to do differently next time. This week we had a lot of rain, and so I was thinking that because there wasn't a lot of sun out that I should let the jar sit longer, so I ended up letting it sit for about 3 days. I think that and the combination of the fact that I put honey in it before I had let it brew, it actually started to ferment a little bit, so when I opened it, it was almost carbonated, which was really interesting. So it's still really good, it's just got a little bit of a zest to it. So I think next time I'll make sure I just do it for the 24, maybe 48 hours at most, but I'm gonna wait to put the honey in it until after I've strained the leaves out and it goes in the fridge to try to kind of prevent that from happening. Today I discovered what's eating my kale. See those little worms, caterpillar things there? So those are cabbage worms, which is a real bummer. So I'm going to pick them off of the plant and try to clean the plant off with some soapy water. Cabbage worms are actually more of a caterpillar. They are the larvae of a particular kind of moth, and they the larvae really enjoy feeding on really any of the members of the brassica family. So cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, turnips I think are in there too, collard greens, really any of those really leafy, bushy vegetables. And as I'll show you in a second, they can really do a lot of damage to those different crops. And in about 4 or 5 days, they really decimated one of my kale container plants. You can see how many of those cabbage worms I ended up pulling off. That's just a mixture of water and soap to try to get rid of them. But I mean, look at how much damage they did. I mean, this leaf is almost completely decimated. So, I mean, this one's like completely gone. So I think I'm just gonna clip these ones that have been really badly damaged. I'll leave some of these bigger ones so that the kale can still photosynthesize, but I'll just kind of try to start over. This smaller grouping was a little less affected, so we've got a few holes in it, but I'm just gonna have to keep a better eye on my kale, I think. The kale is also springing back really well. I went ahead and got rid of the main leaves on this plant that were just completely eaten away, and we've already got a few smaller ones coming back in. So it's just gonna spring right back and it's gonna be great, but I am gonna keep a much closer eye on them this time to make sure we don't have any more of those cabbage worms. Oh, there's one right there. So that's why we're gonna be really diligent about that. I also found some of the eggs for these cabbage worms, so I'm gonna pull those off while I'm at it. I found aphids on my cucumber plants. So those are those black specks that you can see all over everything. So I need to address that problem. I made this concoction, and it's basically a couple tablespoons of dish soap and water, and I'm gonna spray it directly onto the spots where I can see those aphid bugs, and then I'm gonna gently wipe it off. This can also kill the beneficial bugs, so I don't want to do that, but I'm gonna do the best I can to get these off. I also did just find a little cucumber nub, so that's exciting. So we've got to protect it. I sprayed it down, and you can see it really just stopped all those insects in their tracks. I figured out very quickly you can't really wipe it off because of the just roughness of the leaves. So I'm just gonna kind of let it sit, and then when I water them tonight, it'll rinse all that stuff off. We're also able to get rid of the aphids. So they're completely gone on my cucumber plant. So that's good. And again, I'm just gonna keep an eye out, make sure that doesn't happen again. Spray it down again if I need to. Got a little baby cucumber there. And another one back there. I'm gonna have to thin out the bush beans. When I initially planted it, I planted 2 seeds per hole, thinking the chances of both seeds actually sprouting were pretty low, but they all sprouted, especially in this pot. All 8 seeds sprouted. In this pot, these 2 didn't, so I'll be able to just move one over here. But that means I'm gonna have 6 extra bush bean plants. So I'm gonna see if I can give them away, and if not, then I'm going to get another pot or 2. Here's the bush beans that remained in the pot. They're looking all right. I watered them. A couple of them are a little bit droopy. Their root systems were so connected that it was pretty hard to get them apart. So here's the ones that I took out of those pots. They're looking real droopy. So I watered them really well. We'll see how they do. I might have waited too long to try to thin those out, so I'll keep you updated on how that goes. And here's the bush beans that we thinned out. So you can see this pot's doing great. They're still growing well. This one sprung back. This pot's also doing well. I've got 5 of them in here, which the only concern I have with that is just the roots having enough space down in that pot. But then the ones I transplanted down here, so we've got 3 in this pot, they're also doing great. They're starting to to shoot up in the middle. So they really sprang back well. I'm really pleased with that. They just needed some water and some time to put down their own roots. I ended up giving 2 of the plants away to a friend to plant in her garden, and they're also springing back really well. So really happy about that. Thought we might talk a bit about tomatoes. Tomatoes are a great plant because they're pretty malleable. You can kind of get them to grow however you want if you put the right systems in place for them. And they're also pretty forgiving, which is nice. I've just sort of allowed these tomato plants to grow on their own. And as you can see, they're pretty bushy, so they're kind of going out wide. If I go through and pull some of the suckers that are on them, the main stem will continue to grow longer. So in greenhouses and places like that, they actually usually just have one stem that they're continuing to grow longer and longer. You can also get them to grow horizontally, so I could potentially get them to grow along the fence if I used clips and things like that. I'm not gonna do that this year, but what I am gonna do with this plant that's gotten pretty bushy is I'm actually going to go ahead and clip one of the suckers, which is actually turned into a main side stem, and I'm gonna propagate it and give it its own pot. Those fuzzy little hairs that you can see are called trichomes. And basically those help protect the plant from pests, and they secrete essential oils to basically deter different pests. So they're really important to the overall health of the plant. So when I'm pruning this plant, I'm going to be really careful to make sure that that stays intact. It's kind of a misnomer that those will form roots. Their tomatoes can grow what are called adventitious roots, which are the parts that, if put in contact with soil, will form roots. I think maybe you can see some kind of right down at the base of the plant. But those are like thicker, almost like bristles that kind of form, as opposed to the fine little hairs that you see higher up. So I'm going to do my best not to disturb the rest of the plant while I'm doing this. I'm going to start by just taking my cage off here. And then it's this whole piece here that's actually our sucker. It's stemming from the main piece. So I'm going to get as close down to the soil as I can and just clip it. And I've already got this pot ready to go with some soil. You can put it in water first, so those roots will grow. I'm actually going to pull a couple of these stems off so I can plant it a little bit better. I'm going to replace my tomato cage on this one, and then I'll actually end up building another tomato cage for this little guy. I just got rid of a few of the stems at the bottom and then planted it pretty well in there to give it some stability. And then I'm going to go ahead and construct another tomato cage for this planter. I think I'm also going to move my basil over into this pot. Basil likes tomato better than it likes other herbs, and my basil's just not very happy in that pot. I don't know if you can see right there. It's just not super happy. And so I think I'm going to move it in with this other tomato and kind of help them both out. Just trying to be really gentle with the root system here. move my little marker over too. Okay, last looks for today, which is Tuesday. So I got the cage built around this tomato plant that I cut off and put in its own pot today. You can see the basil's already in there. I went ahead and watered it really well. It's looking a little droopy right now, but hopefully once it starts to send out some roots, it'll perk back up. Here's our tomato plant transplant. And as you can see, we lost some of the branches at the bottom, but it's really starting to put down roots. I can tell when I kind of move it around a little bit, it's a lot more stable than it was before. But I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hold on to the tomatoes that are on there, or if it's going to focus on putting down those roots for now. It might have been a little late to try to repot that one, but you can see the plant that we took it off of is actually already starting to produce quite a few more tomatoes. So it was really good for this plant to be able to kind of focus on producing fruit. We'll just keep this one well hydrated, and maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I think it's going to be great. I also wanted to show you, I harvested some lettuce last week, and I've never had this lettuce that's on a stem like this, and so I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And everyone I talked to and everything I could find basically said to go ahead and cut it at the stem with a serrated knife. And so I did that with the other one, and I was a little skeptical, but you can see when I get really close, there's a few little buds starting all the way around the stem. So it's actually made that stem healthier. So I'm pretty optimistic that that lettuce is gonna bush back up. Thanks for going on this gardening journey with me. If you have any questions or want to share your own gardening stories with me, please feel free to connect with me down below in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can get all the updates. Happy gardening, friends!